Hi, everyone. Welcome to the MSU CHAARG Diversity and Allyship Panel. I just wanted to say thank you all for coming. We really appreciate you coming out on a Sunday, taking time out of your day, and special thanks to our panelists for doing the same. We appreciate it so much. We are so thankful to be holding this event and just wanted to say thank you. This summer, we started the Diversity and Inclusion Committee to be more welcoming, empowering, and to everyone on our campus within our chapter, and then, of course, within other chapters across the country. We're learning how to be better allies and give safe spaces to the BIPOC community, and this is our first event as a committee. We're so thankful we get to host this and hope it makes some sort of difference. I just want to give a special shout out to my Diversity and Inclusion Committee. You guys are amazing. This wouldn't have been able to happen without you. So thank you. Before we get started, I just wanted to take a brief moment to introduce all of our panelists. Our first panelist is Dr. Farah Ababi, an assistant professor in the Department of Psychiatry at MSU and a core faculty member of the Muslim Studies program. She's the founding director of the annual Muslim Health Conference, and she currently chairs the Mental Health Task Force for the mayor of Lansing, Michigan. The goal that she is constantly working towards is learning to coexist and go beyond our differences to reach the common point of peace and prosperity. Next, we have Dr. Hilda Mejia Abreu with us today as well. She is the Associate Dean for Admissions, Student Life, and Inclusivity within the College of Veterinary Medicine at MSU. As the University of Texas Health Science Center's Associate Dean for Admissions and Student Affairs for the School of Nursing in her past, she helped to develop and implement a recruitment strategy that increased enrollment in 4 years with increased diversity of students. A philosophy she follows is knowing that leadership is the ability to collect the strengths of all team members and organize these in a way that will ensure success. Next, we have Ayula Green. She has worked in a variety of industries, but currently works on projects for the University of Oklahoma, including Healthy Steps, an initiative to support parents in the well-being of their children. Her broad family dynamic has led her to have a perspective on life to focus on the needs of those around her, and what drives her is a commitment to compassion and equity. Lastly, we have Leonardo Pizzagna, who is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Specialist for MSU Extension for the past 21 years. He designs and writes curriculum and co-facilitates DEI, which is Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion focused learning opportunities for MSU Extension staff, community members, K-12 school systems, nonprofits, and local governments across the state and country. He currently works with BIPOC staff within MSU Extension to help change, update, and transform the organizational culture to better meet the needs of racially diverse communities. He has been honored to be loved, taught, challenged, and transformed by a diverse set of members, learning experiences, and colleagues over the years. So this is kind of the flow of today's event. We can have a question session at the end of each presentation. We'll have a big one at the end, but if you don't want to speak up, you can just put it in the chat. We will get to you, but we would love to hear from you guys. We just ask that you be respectful because this is a safe space, a safe environment for everybody. And first, we will start with Dr. Farah Ababi.
Saying all that. And then not seeing any action being done. So what happens, you kind of numb yourself. You see like, okay, if I am worthless, meaningless, and I'm not having an impact and nothing is gonna change, so let's just forget about it, numb yourself, let's not deal with it. So these are 3 psychological factors that really impact somebody being exposed to persistent toxic stress and racism. We can go to the next slide. So we see, these are the terminology you will see. Up to now, we were being taught implicit bias and microaggressions, which are kind of unconscious. Or I love, somebody once taught me the word disconsciousness, that we have learned to accept the collective explanation of things, right? We don't question what is happening around us. So, but now what we are seeing lately is that these are not microaggressions anymore. These are very distressing and apparent racial macroaggressions that we are seeing. These are very overt experiences. There is violence, there is trauma, there is, even in COVID-19, we saw how disproportionately this population was affected. So this is, I always talk about that right now, what we are experiencing in the country is racial macroaggression. We can go to the next one. And you will see in the form of racial macroaggression, constantly being told to go back to your country. Or, you know, I can talk about Muslim perspective, your hijabs being set on fire, or even professors asking you in a class that I don't know what you are hiding under your hijab. Are you carrying a bomb? Things like that. These are racial, very apparent, in your face kind of threats. And of course, we are seeing with Black Lives Matters and all the police brutality and all the incidences, and we are seeing the judgments coming is not kind of doing justice. So all this is racial macroaggression. And then, of course, microaggressions continue too, which is subtle, unintentional, things like being followed in a shopping store, or assuming that the protest became violent because that was the inherent nature of the community protesting. So all this is also subtle and subliminal messages that we continue to receive. And of course, the biggest barrier, I still think, is structural racism. The policies are not reflective of the diversity in the country. It's not friendly or open to everyone. It's not, so we talk about equality, but there's no equity. There's no, we talk about inclusivity, but it's still very partial. Still there is a preferred, like, you know, if you send your resume, that you will get an immediate response if you belong to certain communities, and then you might be, there might not be that many good job openings for you given your skin color. So we also see this, and this still, I think MSU is trying very hard to change the culture, but we still see there is such a shortage of faculty of color or faculty of color being represented in important positions. And then the assumption, of course, that if one person has done something, this means the whole community is like that. So sameness due to race, like just putting everybody under one umbrella or one box. And the policies, we are seeing voter disenfranchisement, racial profiling continues. And of course, the biggest thing is the sentencing inequities in the country, the pipeline to jail. I mean, we can go and look at it, that how disproportionately the population of color is incarcerated. For smaller crimes or smaller misdemeanors, they end up with a major punishment. So that is huge example of structural racism. We can go to the next one. So cultural racism, right? I don't see color, I don't differentiate. That's been the longest we have talked about our sense of justice as, oh, I don't see color, I treat everybody equal. That in itself is a very racist comment, right? We also see a lack of representation in the culture around us, movie, television. There's no supportive social media. Still, there is lack of public outrage about the violence that we are seeing around us. So there's another concept in psychology, the otherization. It is basically, and we can go to the other slide, but I will briefly talk about that. The otherization is that as long as I'm safe, my life is going smoothly, things are just happening to somebody else or these others, then somehow these others deserve this. The others must be doing something wrong to deserve this, or why this way they are being dealt with, right? That otherization kind of, it's almost like breaking somebody down from the, like not valuing them as humans and treating them at some lower level. Like it's almost like you become so apathetic that you don't even, you stop thinking like, oh, this is another human that's suffering. That's another human life that was wasted or was taken away unfairly. You don't think in that terms. You become very apathetic. You start thinking of them as some inanimate object, or that is what otherization does to you. And of course, what we are seeing, higher rates of depression, stress, emotional distress, anxiety is really high in these minority populations. We see a lot of PTSD. And then, of course, the frustration, the hopelessness, the learned helplessness leads to more suicidal thoughts. So right now, the numbers that are very scary that I talk about, that we always thought of suicide as a older white man problem. But recent years have shown that the rate of suicide has doubled in young women of color from 18 to 24. And that is very scary to me, that we are still not dealing with the problem. We are still thinking like, oh, this is white man with a gun. But actually, the impact on women of color is so huge right now, and especially that age group, that we really need to refocus our policies, or even when we are treating mental illnesses, we have to take a step back and understand this trauma. So this is what I call, it is like a PTSD kind of syndrome that we see. It's called racial battle fatigue, where you will have severe anxiety, unpredictability, hypervigilance. You can have headaches, and you can have physical health issues like increased blood pressure, cholesterol. That's why we see higher rate of diabetes in this population, or hypertension or cardiovascular risk factors. We can go to the next. So this is another thing that the literature on Black population in the America talks about is John Henryism. And I personally, being a woman of color in faculty, have felt like this too, that just to prove my worth, I have to work harder. I can make no mistake. I can not delay an assignment. I have to be always on my toes and do more than anyone else is doing. So we all have experienced this, but this is very ingrained in the Black community, is that value of that it doesn't matter what your odds against you are, you have to work hard and overcome them. But that is like putting so much pressure on the community. And that's where the concept of, oh, if you are not doing well, then you are lazy, you are not working hard. So that's a double jeopardy for people who are already traumatized, already feeling the stress, and then having this kind of load put on you to constantly prove yourself. We can go to the next slide. And then, of course, if you don't have healthy coping skills, if you are not accessing care. So another thing that we see, on one hand, we are seeing increasing number of depression, anxiety, PTSD in these populations, but then access to care is not good because of the health disparities or because of the stigma around mental illnesses. So the rate of accessing care is very low in a population of color, and in comparison to the rate of mental illnesses are increasing. So of course, if you're not coping with it in a healthy way, if you're not accessing care, chances are you will tend to then indulge in more unhealthy activities like smoking, alcohol, drug use, eating. Obesity has become really high. So all this kind of, that's why I said that it's interesting how one vulnerability kind of works with the other vulnerability, and then it augments. So it is like, it could be your being exposed to racism, trauma, health disparities, or socioeconomic status. It just jumbles up together and make it really difficult for anyone to overcome it. And this is actually a warning recently given by American Academy of Pediatrics, that failure to address racism in the United States will continue to undermine health equity of all children, adolescents, and emerging adults and their families. So this is a vicious cycle. We already know that adverse childhood experiences survey proved to us that how childhood trauma predetermines your, not only your lifespan, your health spectrum, your educational skill, all is like what your exposure to trauma was as a child. But unfortunately, just recently I discovered that even this adverse childhood experiences survey study was never conducted in any minority setting. So it is not even reflective of the trauma that is happening by exposure to this persistent racism. So if we go with adverse childhood experiences survey, if you have been, so it's a 1 to 10 scale, and if you have been exposed to 4 or 5 symptoms, then you can have almost like a 10-15 years of lifespan shortened. So if you put it in the minority setting, then the results would be really more hard, more trauma. So it is really a moment to for us all to wake up to the reality of how it is weakening us as a society from within. We can go to the last one. And this was, again, we talk about childhood, but imagine the mothers who are carrying these babies, that they are exposed to this racism. So it starts very early on. And that's why I'm talking about preventive rather than after, when we see them in crisis, that we should be thinking very in preventive terms now. So I want to end on a more positive note, that how I know the odds are against us and the numbers are becoming harder to even deal with, or what we saw with COVID-19, what we are still seeing with police brutality, what we are seeing with ICE, with DACA, or Islamophobia. This is very hard for right now to stay resilient, to stay positive. But these are few things that we absolutely need to know how stress impacts us, how trauma can impact us, resist in the sense that it is very important to be advocate for yourself, talk about it. I always say visibility is viability. This is not a moment to be silent. We need to engage, we need to advocate, we need to be like, stand up for these causes, these vulnerabilities, be it any spectrum we are functioning in. Reduce means you can reduce the exposure to trauma by not indulging in, right now the news are coming out are very negative. So kind of moderate it for yourself, be aware of all the issues, policies, legislative things that's happening around you, but then knowing when to curtail it, when to give yourself a break, when to rejuvenate, give yourself time to relax. So these are very important. How do you moderate the trauma? But it's an ongoing process, and again, we all have to do our part, and I think that is why when you guys reached out to me, I had to push myself to be here, to be part of this, and this is a great initiative, and I wish you guys all the best in this. I'm open to question answers.
Thank you so much. That was great. If anybody has...
If we don't have time right now, it's okay. I can wait and come back in the end.
Okay, yeah, if anybody has a question, they can throw it in the chat. They can pop on. All right, well, we might have some at the end, but I just want to say thank you so much. That was a great presentation and very thoughtful, so thank you. And next, we have Dr. Hilda Mejia Abreu. I'm going to let you take over. Here you go.
Wonderful. Thank you, Elizabeth. It's so nice to be here. When I received the invitation, I was very thrilled to be here with you today. Before I begin, I really like to acknowledge how difficult it has been for everyone with COVID, and also with some of our colleagues and friends and humans have experienced since April. So I really want to acknowledge that. I also would like to acknowledge Dr. Abassi, because she mentioned some really key points that I like to address. And two of them were structural racism and ways that we can address those, and then how diverse women and men are assessed, meaning men are usually assessed for their potential and women are assessed for their accomplishment, which is, it seems to be kind of a double standard. So I like to acknowledge Dr. Abassi for her presentation, and I'm grateful. I thought that it would be important and very fitting to the second person speaking that I would talk to you about advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what the bonus is for DEI. So one of the things that I tell my colleagues regularly, if you can go to the next slide, is that what gets measured gets done. So if we could go to the second slide to show a little bit about how I mean that. So if you don't measure, meaning in our organizations, and I know that I'm speaking as a person, but that's what I like to do. Because if you don't get measurement of how fast you're going with DEI, it does not get done. Or the corporation will not be able to get work done. And without strategies and tactics, DEI will not be advanced, meaning Dr. Abassi spoke about faculty of color. So do we have a strategy for bringing into MSU more diverse faculty so that as students, and I used to be an MSU student, I graduated from my PhD from Michigan State, I was afraid to go into my department where there was no one, no Latina, no Latinx, no Dominican, that would be part of my teaching faculty. That was very scary, and I struggled. So I think without those strategies and tactics, it's going to be really difficult to advance this work. And data is absolutely powerful. So I'm going to show you some data. If you can go to the next slide. Keeps me up at night. African Americans faculty at Michigan State are 5.4%. Students, 8%. US Census tells us that it's 12.6% of the population of African Americans. Then I go on to American Indian and Alaska Native, 0.4% of the faculty, 0.3% of the students, and 0.9% of the population. Asian, 0.5%, 5.7% students, 4.8% according to the US Census data. Hawaiian Pacific Islander, 0.2%, 0.1% students, 0.2% of the US Census data. Hispanic, Latino, Latina, Latinx of any race, 4.2% faculty, 4.8% students, 16.3% of the population any race. We're doing much better when it comes to Latinx, but I said that's not good enough. To me, we really need to look at equity when it comes to those percentages in the population. So if you look at the total, and you can read that, and then you look at the white Caucasian, the white population, 73.8% faculty, 76.8% students, 72.4% of the population. So I said, no, you would not. So, and that's where we need to do some targeted recruitment, and we really try to look at the MSU faculty population similar to the population of this country. So next slide. So why is diversity important? I am at a college of veterinary medicine. Leonardo knows my college fairly well because he used to work with my former dean, Dr. John Baker. And if you look at the data in terms of veterinary medicine, 92.3% of practicing veterinarians are Caucasian. That's not bad, but I think that creates a really big challenge for the profession when it comes to the economy of the profession and when it comes to people that feel comfortable with their practitioners or their veterinarians or doctors, meaning that if you don't have a practicing group of veterinarians that resemble the population, the profession is going to decline in terms of economic, and then you're not going to feel up to going to a veterinarian that might not speak your language. So I'll give you an example. My mother, who does not speak English, will not go to a doctor that doesn't speak Spanish. So we have a great opportunity in veterinary medicine, and I would say probably in medicine and other healthcare field, so that we can serve the underserved. So why is diversity important? Better educational experience for all students. I know that when I was a graduate student, my colleagues would come to me and say, so how do you see this, Hilda? Tell me about your input, because I saw life through different lenses, and that really enhanced the educational experience of some of my colleagues. I think the fact that if you have a very diverse population of medical professionals, veterinarians, lawyers, business, you name it, you can improve access not only to care, but also to professional services. It really makes the point for institutional excellence and societal excellence. So those are my 4 big buckets why diversity is important. Next slide, please. So there are some great studies, and this is just, I have an extensive library and I can share that with Elizabeth, but some of the studies that you see cited here really make the case for the educational benefits of diversity, equity, and inclusion when we have populations of students that are very diverse at a university. And that has been my life work. My dissertation actually looks at predictors of success in medical school. So predictors of success looking at grit using the framework of Elizabeth Duckworth from University of Pennsylvania. And that's how we were able to change the admissions process at Michigan State College of Veterinary Medicine by looking at the entire human being, not just at grades, not just a standardized test, because if you know anything about tests, they're no norm with a population that looks like some of us in this virtual environment. So these are a great study. I suggest that you look at them, review them as the future leaders in whether you go into healthcare or education, but these are really, really important. Next slide. So I am a follower of a scholar by the name of Scott Page. He's a mathematician, by the way, and he has worked for Google, Facebook, you name it. And what he says is the diversity bonus is 2 + 1 = 4, meaning that 2 + 1, that 1 = 2. Because difference is a collection of people with diverse preferences, often prove better at problem solving the collection of people who agree. On my team, I have 11 colleagues, and my entire team is quite diverse. I have older people, younger people. I have Latinas, and they together make our team a lot better because we look at how the life, different lenses, and that makes us a lot more productive. Not to say from my own evidence, but if you look at BMW, and when they were struggling with one of their fast car, I think it was the i248, what they did is they brought together a group of diverse people to solve these problems. And they created one of the best, fastest car in BMW history. You know why? Because there were diverse people at the table looking at different issues from different approaches. In fact, according to Scott Page, if you look at publications that are reviewed by diverse people are actually more cited than those publications provided by same type of people. So that is powerful to me. So that's an example of why differences is a plus. Next slide, please. So I thought that it would be important to define diversity for this group because it's important. Most people define diversity as race and ethnicity. I have the approach of defining diversity as everyone. Caucasian, first gen, low socioeconomic background, ethnicity, race, and I think we're all uniquely different, whether we are Hispanic, Latinx, or Asian. So I thought that it would be important to define this for you. And then my next definition is equity. So if you could bring the next slide. So if you look at this slide, which is very, the first slide, the first quadrant shows you in the first image, it is assumed that everyone will benefit from the same supports. The middle slide, the second image, individuals are given different supports, so those different tools, to make it possible for them to have equal access to the game. I love baseball. I'm from the Dominican Republic, so I had to use that slide. So, so they're being treated different, but some level of equity. We bring the back. All three can see the game without any support or accommodation. That's what I call equity. That is really important to remember. You can the barriers, or you can give people different tools. They might fall from those tools, right? So I think taking down those barriers and creating a level playing field is what is important when it comes to equity. The next slide talks to you about inclusion. a lot of people ask me, what do you define as inclusion? And I usually give them a very good example because I love dance. The Dominican Republic, I love dancing merengue, salsa, you name it. Dancing is my life. I haven't been since COVID because we can't go and dance, right? So the way I define inclusion is invited to the party and being asked to dance. If you're invited to the party and you're not being asked to dance, that is exclusion. I'll give you an example. Let's say that in my college of veterinary medicine, the curriculum is, and I'm asked to come in and give my input about how do we deal with anatomy. And students still learn differently. And I give the example that for a student from maybe Puerto Rico or the Dominican Republic, where English is not the first language, then maybe we need to make some accommodation for X, Y, and Z. My proposal is not heard, nothing is done, and there we have 10 students from Puerto Rico, and they're not able to navigate this because nobody pay attention. I was invited to the dance. Does that make sense? Just shake your head if that. So, and I can share with you the Coca-Cola or Pepsi commercial where people display this commercial, probably the diversity team being paid thousands of dollars at Coca-Cola were consulted, but nobody paid attention. And there it went all crazy. So if you don't know about that example, I suggest that you Google it. It's either Coca-Cola or Pepsi, or even there are other commercials that you can look at and say, wow, they didn't even consult diversity and inclusion, equity and inclusion team. Or maybe they did, but they forgot to listen. Maybe they didn't pay attention. But when you are in the big leagues, not paying attention is not an acceptable excuse, at least not in my book. You fail, and you have failed a number of millions of people. That's my definition of inclusiveness. Next. So with that, I'd like to thank you, and I'd like to say to you that you are amazing. The 63 of you have logged on a Sunday afternoon to really learn about DEI and to really be the changing force for this country. And I am beyond grateful, because what you will not believe, probably you will, is that when I was a student at University of Massachusetts, I have 4 siblings. I have 4 siblings. I am the lightest of all of them. Everybody is very dark in my family. I don't know why I came out so light. And when we rented an apartment in East Boston, Massachusetts, when my sister arrived to take everything out of the truck to move into our apartment, the neighbors threatened to burn down the apartment. That gave me the impetus to do this work and to be very intentional about this work. So we had to sleep in a truck that night until we found a place to live, because my sisters were too dark for the neighborhood. So I want to share that with you so that you are very intentional with your work, the people that you work with, and the service that you will provide. And with that, I'd like to thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions that we have?
Yeah, I have a question.
Oh, go for it. Sorry.
So we just started our diversity and inclusion committee in CHAARG. So I guess given like the circumstances with COVID and it's our first year, it can be like kind of hard trying to figure out what to do. So I was just wondering if you have any advice for us to be just like a more inclusive group on campus.
So My suggestion to you is, because we have to all work virtually and observe physical distancing, whatever you can do that can be done virtually, I would urge you to do so that you can connect with those communities which are feeling terribly isolated. I too feel isolated. I've been working from home since March. I am unable to see my students, although I have horses. So I asked some of my students from California and Texas to come and spend time in my barn. I have 4 horses, and they have come like every 2 hours to work with them so they can feel some sense of connectedness. I think whatever you can do to really do some virtual engagement, that would be great, because our students, our faculty, and our staff are feeling terribly isolated. This is no time that we have experienced ever. In fact, our grandparents probably experienced during 1918 some of this during a pandemic. But I think that what we can do today is really going to inform future generations that while CHAARG might not have been able to have meetings on campus, they were able to do some things virtually, including, so I'll give you an example of what we're doing virtually. For our diversity and inclusion committee and students, we are actually deploying what is called factuality, which is a game online about redlining in this country and how people that were brown could not purchase a home. So it was created using the principles of monopoly. So on October 15, about 150 of us will get online to play this game in order to bring community together. So that's an example of something that you can do. Call your colleagues, call your membership. It's so critically important to be connected this day. I feel very lonely. I don't have any family here. My family's in Florida and in Boston, and I feel so disconnected. So that's why I invited my students here. Every weekend, I'm inviting them to come every 2 hours and take care of the horses, and I can wave hello from a distance. So that would be my recommendation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, I have a question as well. Your story really spoke to me. My grandma her parents brought her here from Mexico when she was like 4 or 5. And my great-grandpa and my great-grandma spoke very broken English. And my grandma's told me stories of them in a grocery store, like checking out, and they would get slandered, kind of like you were talking about, you and your siblings. So I grew up hearing stories about how like my great-grandparents and my aunts and uncles who live in Texas won't go see healthcare professionals who don't speak Spanish, which I completely understand because it is a scary environment, especially unwelcoming. But as a future healthcare professional who is white and not, a minority, I was wondering if you had like any tips for myself, how I could be a better ally to those who do feel, I'm trying to think of the word, who feel not welcome or not safe with a healthcare provider who is non-Hispanic or non of the culture, or trying to think of words, if my question makes sense.
I understand your question. That's a great question. My youngest sister is a cardiologist. She is the baby in the family and about 4'11", and of course speaks English and Spanish, but doesn't look very Latina. And she had the opportunity to provide services, healthcare services at Beth Israel Hospital in Boston to a person that was a congressman. And initially this person said to her, number one, you look too young to be able to save my life. Number two, your English is not perfect. Number three, I don't know why you're here. And my sister said, and this is what I would suggest you say, this from real experience. My sister said, I am a competent cardiologist and I'm gonna save your life. So allow me to do so, and we will be in a better place by the end of the night. So I think being kind and letting people know that you have got this, that you have the skills necessary to provide the services that you have been trained to do so, I think that would be important. However, I would suggest if you could learn Spanish and practice it, that would be great. Number one, it would really advance your career. Number two, there are 60 million Latinos in this country, counted for. I don't know about the ones that have not been counted, but 60 million, 16% of the population. I think it would be really important if you at least know more about language and culture, because that will help you with your clients. My brother-in-law, who's married to my youngest sister, is an orthopedic surgeon. And he tells me all the time, I really feel I should have learned Spanish. I should have learned more about the culture, because now I'm calling all the time, can you please help? So I think that's my recommendation to you. Just be competent, be kind, be patient, be peaceful how you approach your patient, because they're at a different place, and that should help you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right. We can save any other questions for the end, so we can go ahead and move on. Thank you all so far. Next, we're passing it over to our next panelist. I know you said you didn't have any slides, so you just had like a little script, so I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. So I'm basically just going to have a conversation with you. I could tell by some of the previous presentations, as this was getting set up, that there were a lot of things that looked very lecture-like and very good as far as setting up an academic standpoint. So I decided to take a little bit different route for two reasons. For one, because I know that with Zoom, sometimes there's just the fatigue of like watching slide after slide after slide. So that can be challenging. So I want to give you a little break from that. And secondly, because with this particular topic and with the section that I'm speaking on, particularly about finding your voice, it's the impact of finding your voice comes from using your voice. And so I just want to also emulate that by just using my voice to have a conversation with you, just to talk about a few things. So the first thing I want to let you know is just a little bit about who I am, where I come from. So I was born in Sierra Leone, West Africa. Now, for those of you that are unfamiliar, Sierra Leone is a beautiful country on the west coast of Africa. We've got white sand beaches. We're famous for the biggest diamond mines. We've got palm trees everywhere that have all kinds of fruits on them. And every single day, 100% of the time, we have the best rice on the planet. Now, there are people that will argue with that. The Kenyans will argue, the Nigerians will argue, the Asians will all argue that we don't have the best rice. I promise you we do. So I tell you that to tell you that I started in Sierra Leone, and whenever I looked around, I was there with a lot of my family, a lot of my friends, and most of the people that were there looked very much like me. So we were various shades of brown, medium complexion to darker complexions. Most of us have a natural texture hair with a natural hairstyle. A lot of us have really long, thick hair. That was just kind of what Sierra Leone looks like. So to me, that's what people look like. My father, he works in an industry that allows him to do a lot of traveling. He does a lot of international traveling. And so from time to time, whenever we weren't in school, whenever we didn't have a lot of other just obligations at home, he would take us with him. So we would travel and we would get to go all kinds of places. So by the time I was 5 years old, I had been to 12 countries. We spent a lot of time, we'd eaten a lot of food, tasted a lot of different types of desserts, eaten a lot of rice. And I can tell you for sure, Sierra Leone has the best rice. Now, whenever I was about 7 years old, my dad came home one day and he said, "Hey guys, listen, I have an opportunity to do some things from a different base, and I decided to accept it. So we're all gonna move to the United States of America, which is fantastic, right? Super cool. I'd already been to the United States several times. We went to New York, we've been to Las Vegas, we've been to LA. I love the United States, great shopping, fun people, all kinds of activities. So I was super happy. I love Sierra Leone, but I knew we'd always be able to come back because one, it's home, and two, we travel a lot anyway, and we would continue to do so. So we would just be in a different environment, different kind of place. So we took this long plane ride, connected to another long plane ride, connected to another long plane ride, and we landed in New York. I was excited. So we stayed there for the weekend, spent the night there, did some fun stuff, got on another plane though. And then we took another long plane ride and we landed in Oklahoma. I'd never been to Oklahoma. I'd never heard of Oklahoma. I didn't know what Oklahoma was, what was here. I knew nothing. So, but it's fine. It's the United States, right? So it's got to be like California, and just like New York, right? It's exactly like Las Vegas, just in a different place because it's America. It's all like America. So I was severely disappointed when we moved into our house in McAlester, Oklahoma, which it's not just Oklahoma. It was a small town in Oklahoma, and I had no idea this place even existed or that people lived in these kinds of places. And it was like 3 stoplights. There was one hospital. There were like a couple of little small restaurants. One of them is called the Piggly Wiggly that is still there today. And you can get this pulled pork sandwich. We'd never eaten pork. I never knew that you could pull a pork and then make a sandwich out of it. But I found out it's delicious. It is now one of my favorite foods on the planet. I've eaten a lot of places and I've had a lot of things. Pulled pork sandwiches from Piggly Wiggly in McAlester, Oklahoma. That's where it's at, let me tell you. So if you're ever in Oklahoma, go to McAlester, find the Piggly Wiggly, because there's only one. Get a pulled pork sandwich and some sweet tea. You won't be mad about it. So I say that to say that I was really, really, really disappointed with the choice to move to McAlester, Oklahoma. And the reason I was disappointed is because I had done something without even knowing it that is a super common, very human thing to do, which was I decided that there's such a thing as a single story for people. I decided that America was one thing, and it was a big city with a lot of lights, with a lot of great shopping, with fast cars, with subways, with public transportation. And to me, all of the places that I had already been supported that narrative. So to me, America is big city living. And so what I found was whenever anything was different, when something challenged that, I had to not just readdress my belief of what America is or what America is not, but I also had to look at my relationship to this new place because we lived here now. This was our address. I wasn't going anywhere other than this place. And so time rolled around, got enrolled in school. I went to this elementary school, and I walked into the classroom, and the teacher, she brought me to the front and she introduced me to the class. Hi, everyone. Here's our new student. This is Kenya. Uh-oh. So, my name is not Kenya, and I was not from Kenya. And so I was immediately embarrassed and offended because I felt like she didn't even take the time to know who I was. And already I assumed that she didn't care about me or who I was or what kind of a person I was. But I really had, as I got older and I can now look back, I realized that she had done exactly the same thing that I did. She believed in a single narrative, a single story for people. So to her, Africa was Kenya. A person from Africa is Kenyan, and their name is probably Kenya if they're a girl. And so I want to encourage you to, one, be really mindful that, yes, we've already heard that racism in the United States exists. And so Dr. Abassi did a really good job of showing us some of the data and the literature that supports that it's still here. And then we got an idea of what we should do with some of that. So some of the things that we should do with that are maybe change some of the numbers, increase the diversity, and that's important. That's extremely important to make sure that people are represented in all kinds of demographics, all kinds of people. So then my question and the point of this talk that we're going to have today is not just, does it exist? We know it does. Should we do something to make it more diverse? Yeah, we should. We know that. So then how do we do that? What are some of the actual things that we can do to make sure that, one, as we're looking at increasing the diversity, how do we make sure that we don't just increase diversity? Because diversity can be measured in numbers, but it's not just about numbers, especially if we're talking about people. It's not even about numbers. It's about humans, and it's about community, right? So what we really want to focus on is thinking small, thinking closer, thinking about connections and building bridges from one person to another. And so how we do that is we really focus on, one, all of the things that we are more connected to, how we have more things in common than we have different. I've been to, at this point in my life, I've been to almost 50 countries. And I've learned that most things about humanity are human. So the majority of things that we think, the majority of the way that we feel, the majority of how we do things, those are from being human. So we have so much more alike than we have different. So whenever we come across a person that doesn't talk the way that we talk, that doesn't speak the language that we speak, that doesn't look the way that we look, or isn't from where we're from, how we can bridge that gap is using our voice to begin with getting a little curious. Say hello, ask them their name, ask them if you're pronouncing it correctly, and then ask them what they prefer to be called. So the first word that a person gets in life is their name. And so it's important. Find out the story behind how they got this name. Why did your parents choose this one? Out of all of the names in the world, your parents gave you that one. I wonder what that means to you. I wonder what that meant to them. Is that a family name? My name is Ayula. My grandmother's name is Eula. I was named after my grandmother, but given a little bit of space to be different and be my own person, but still keep me super connected to my legacy and to my family. So I love my name. I get to say my name, and anytime anyone asks me, I tell them what my name is. My name has a meaning. My name means born in December in the land that is not your own. I was born in December, and Sierra Leone used to be called the land that is not your own. The name changed over some time with some political things, but that's what it used to be called. So my name tells you when I was born in December, just like my grandmother, because her Eula means born in December. So my grandmother was born in December. I was born in December. It tells you where I was born. It also gives you just a little bit of history about my parents, how important family and connection are, because they made sure that I was able to be connected to my family, even just by my name. They also valued autonomy. So they gave me a little space to be my own person. So they gave me room to move, to grow, to be, but not so far that I'm out on my own, because I'm not. None of us are. None of us are really out here on our own. And so they provided an opportunity. Whenever you have a chance to be in a place, and if you have a seat next to you and you know someone and you have a friend, or there's someone that you don't know and there's only one seat there, choose the person that you don't know and invite them to come and sit next to you. If the person that you already know and that's already your good friend is really your good friend, then whether or not they sit with you in this one event is not going to make or break your friendship. If it does, they're probably not your real friend anyway. So it's okay to invite a new person, ask them their name, get to know them. Where are they from? Do they know anyone here? Do they have a friend that maybe they couldn't sit next to? And how does that make them feel? And then talk to them about how you feel about not sitting next to your friend. And now you've created a bridge so that whenever you have a chance to be in a conversation that maybe you disagree on, when you remember all of the things that you do agree on, because you both value learning new things, you both value humans, you both value new relationships, you both value creating connection, you both value community, you can disagree on an issue without having to disagree and become enemies. So there's a study that was done, and I'll just give you some of the simple analogies that were from this study, and then I'll give you some of the more difficult ones, and I won't give you answers to any of these questions, but they would just go up to random people and say, hey, cats or dogs? And then a person would say if they're a cat person or a dog person. So then they would have people based on their answer, they would put them in groups. So if you chose cats, you're over here on the left. If you chose dogs, you're over here on the right. And they give them 2 or 3 minutes just to kind of have conversation about what kind of dog they have, what kind of dog they like, why your cat is better than the other cats, or what's funny about your cat. Do you have a grumpy cat? Does your cat make faces? Those kinds of things. So now they become kind of a community of cat people and dog people. And so then the next question was, okay, everybody come back to the middle, football or soccer? And then people would choose their sides. And you'll have a conversation about why you like football and why you like soccer and why soccer is really the real football of the world versus why like American football is really football and why it's the best thing because the NFL is better than, you know, and then they would bring them all back together. Okay, so you've kind of developed some relationships, you've got some things in common. So then they would ask them something about, you know, a beverage, coffee or tea. Coffee people over here, tea people over here, same type of thing. And then brought them back together. And then they would ask harder questions like, Democrat or Republican? And then people would choose. And then you would see that sometimes the people that were cat people and some of the people that were dog people are now over here together as both Republicans, but one was a cat person, one was a dog person. The conversation would be a little quieter, but over time they would develop a conversation about their political views because they agree on that. So then, okay, now we're Democrats and we're Republicans. Bring them back together. Okay, so now we're going to ask a harder question. Flag, national anthem, stand or kneel? And then people would have to choose one side or the other. And so people would choose and they would walk to their side. And so this time the rules changed a little bit because you have people in both groups that have been cat people and dog people. You have people on both sides that have been coffee people and tea people. You have people on both sides that have been Democrats and Republicans. And now you've got this issue. How do we resolve this? So to change the way that this conversation formulated. So now instead of just letting you talk amongst yourselves, now the new rule is someone on this side has to talk to someone on this side. And as you talk to one another, you have to walk toward the center as you're making your point. And then someone else has an opportunity to walk to the center. And in order to do that, you would name what side you're on all of the other things. And when you found that you were common on everything except this issue, that's who you have your conversation with. Because you already have a relationship. You already have a foundation of being connected. You already have a place that says we're more alike than we are different. And now the questions are, okay, tell me your story about why you choose to stand. What does that mean to you? Why is it so important that people stand? And then this person's role is to listen without interrupting, without thinking, without judging, just to listen with empathy. And then the roles will reverse and this person will have an opportunity to share. And the goal was not to make people agree. The goal was not to make people think the same thing, because that's one of the beauties of diversity is we don't all think the same thing and we shouldn't. We don't all believe the exact same way and we're not supposed to. We should have differences of opinion. We should have different viewpoints. We should disagree on certain things that are really important to us. It's not a problem to disagree. It's a problem to disagree and forget that you ever agreed in the first place. So how you allow people to be a part of your group is to make sure that you find those commonalities first. You find those connections first. You bridge the gap first, and then you always bear in mind that one, this is another human, just like I'm a human. They have thoughts, feelings, and beliefs, just like I have thoughts, feelings, and beliefs. And when they're different, they're exactly that. They're different. They're not right. They're not wrong. I'm not right. I'm not wrong. Because what happens is when we believe that our differences place us in a position of being right, without trying, we become righteous. And that means that if we are righteous and other people are wrong, we can minimize their human value and we can treat them as less than. And so instead of just saying, oh, I understand that you want to do it this way, I want to do it that way, and we don't agree on it, so I'm going to do the thing that I believe and you do what you believe, and we can do it right next to each other and not be enemies, and it's okay. Now you say, well, those people, because they think that and because they don't do this thing, they have to be stupid, they have to be, cruel, they have to be unpatriotic, and both sides will have that same argument and can say those same things as long as they can believe that the other person is less human. So how you allow people to come into your group, how you create connection, how you respond whenever we're separated by screens and separated by 6 feet and or more, is you find ways to be closer on the things that we can connect on, the human things. In this group, as I was doing just some research and getting more data about who you guys are and what you guys do, the whole point, it seems like, of what you want to do is you want to do things that allow you all to be sparked and to be charged and to be energized and to move forward, to allow the power that is within the group to really go out into the community, to go out across the campus, across the other chapters, and make sure that people are powerful and strong and able to have what they need to know that they're supported, they've got community, they've got connection, and they've got people that are in their corner rooting for them. So do that. So root for each other. So encourage each other. Use your voice to talk about all the great things that each other are doing. Talk about all of the things that you notice about someone else that you find fantastic. Make sure you talk about that to them, and then you talk about it to other people. Give everybody an opportunity to hear one more thing that they have in common with other people, so that if there's a conflict between the two of them, they can have a conflict over the issue, over the action, over the choice, but not between each other. Because at the end of the day, a human is another human, and we're all just humans living next to other humans trying to be more human. So I just want to encourage you to think smaller, think closer, think connected, and then as you're thinking smaller, as you're thinking connected, and as you're moving forward, dream big. Because the closer that we are, the stronger that we are, we're way better together than we are separate. So as we're together and we're thinking closer and stronger, let's think closer and dream bigger. So let's dream big enough to know that we can go beyond the boundaries. And some of, like the example of the picture with the fences, we can take down those barriers. We can do that as a team, as a group, together as humans, making sure that humans have what humans need to be able to see the baseball game or whatever it is. We find ways to do that, and just know, always remember that you have within you and within the group of humanity everything that you need. You have enough strength, you have enough patience, you have enough passion, you have enough energy to reach for the stars. So change the world. That's my recommendation to you, especially as young people. You have the time, you have the companionship, you have the tools, and when you don't know the answer, that's okay. And when you're uncomfortable, be comfortable with being uncomfortable, because that's where change happens. Change happens when we're uncomfortable. And sometimes that discomfort comes from walking up to someone that we don't know, a total stranger, and saying, hey, coffee or tea? And have that coffee, have that tea. And even if it's a virtual coffee and a virtual tea, you can ask questions to help you find out what we have common. What do we have connected? What do you eat? What do you like? What do you not like? And then ask those harder questions amongst each other and amongst yourself, because it's important that we know the answers to those harder questions for ourselves. We know what the answer is and we know why that answer is. And tell your story. Tell your story to help other people understand why you believe this thing over that thing, and then listen to their story. Sometimes listening to other people's story actually changes us in a way that maybe our behavior changes. And it doesn't mean that if I believe that we should stand, that I start to kneel, or if I believe we should kneel, that I start to stand. Maybe not change that behavior, but maybe change the behavior of calling them stupid or saying that they're doing it wrong. Maybe I will just behave in a way that says, you know what, they're doing it different, but they're doing their truth. They're living their authenticity. They're living their human story, just like I am. And I'm doing it right next to them. So I just want to encourage every one of you to just remember that, yes, diversity is absolutely important. We need to have all kinds of people come to the table. And then inclusion, everybody that comes to the table should have a seat. Absolutely true. That's inclusion, and that's super important. But what's more than diversity and what's bigger and better than just inclusion is making people feel welcome, making them feel connected. And so you do that by having personal relationships with people, and you do it intentionally, and you do it in a way that really speaks to human from human. And I just want to open it up to an opportunity for questions, but I definitely thank you all for allowing me to come and just to be a part of this. This is a very powerful event, and I'm just really excited that you all are even doing this work. Keep doing the work. Stay charged.
I know we had one question in the chat about what, like that activity that you were talking about the differing opinions and like asking people about that. Is there like a name for that activity?
Yes, it's it was actually a research and activity that was by DePuy University, and you can actually just Google that. I can also send that to one of you and make sure that you have that if you want to send that out to everyone. But yes, I can definitely send that to you.
Okay, yeah. I would love that, and I can send it out as well. And then Jessica had also asked, she just loves your message, and she was kind of asking like how we can try to promote that same message over social media, because I feel like in social media it's easy for people to have those conversations, or to not have a conversation of understanding each other. That's what she had asked.
So and social media is fantastic and tricky, because yes, it gives you like this platform to be able to go on there. You can say whatever you want, and then everybody else has that exact same platform. They can come on, they can type whatever they want to. And in some ways, they can feel the anonymity of being behind a screen, and they can say things that are mean, that are hurtful, that are offensive. I would encourage you, whenever you have those hard conversations, and you absolutely, every one of us should, as you're having those hard conversations, start at the top of, before you even begin with whatever the question is or the topic is that you're going to put out to the people, start off with, because it's important to me that we are as connected as possible, I'm looking for this kind of concern, or I'm looking for people to respond to this issue, and the important issue is this. However, the bigger issue is that while we're discussing this, that we remember that we're all human. And so finding a way to, and you can say it however you want to, but find a way to make sure that you preface your questions with all of the commonalities that you have, and start off, and this is going to sound super cheesy, but make sure that as you're communicating these hard conversations, that you do it in love. Really, really love people. And if you really come from a place of loving people, people will feel that. They can feel that from a post. They can tell if you're actually doing this because you love them, or if you're just doing it for the gram because you know that you're going to get a whole lot of likes. Like, are you really, really connecting? And you can do that through your messages. You can do that through your posts. You can do that through a picture. You can do that through your memes, and just also be consistent. As you're sending this message and you do this message with love, you can't send the next message with hate. Like, you have to be consistent and doing it in a way that says, this is who I am. This is the human that I choose to be. I'm trying to be peaceful, but I'm also curious, and I'm trying to learn, and I'm trying to grow, and I'm also trying to help everybody else learn and grow and stay curious.
Awesome. If we don't have any more questions, we can move on to our last panelist. Leonardo, I'll give it over to you, and then reminder for everyone at the end, we will be doing another questions.
I do have a comment for our speaker that just went, Eula. And I really love your speech, and I totally support and agree with all your points, but for example, I had a cousin who threw a quinceañera party for her daughter and for her niece, and in the process of that, she very heavily mocked and stereotyped Latinx culture, and that was really hurtful. And while I understand that she didn't mean any harm, but she had come from a place where that felt okay. And you speak about rising above and, and trying to make that environment very comfortable so that they can learn. But no one ever supported me when I said, that was very inappropriate for you to do. That was very hurtful. I'm still I still feel so in shock of that mockery. How do I, help them or make a good, healthy environment when I can't even I see her in a completely different light. I can't even look at her in the face for the kind of action she does. How do I help be that better person to be make that better connections when I feel like I didn't have a space where I felt comfortable with that? I don't know if that's the right word.
Okay, I think I understand what you're saying, and that's actually a really great question, and probably more common than you think. So how do you address the people in your life that you're close to, that you love, that you care about, when they do something that is not okay, that is offensive, that is harmful to somebody else? How do you speak to them to get them to not be so hurtful? How do you help them understand that other people have a certain belief, like to the quinceañera? So this is a cultural value, and this is a sacred ritual, and this is important, and it was made a mockery of. So how do you help these people understand these people? Is that kind of your question?
Well, the thing is that I'm Latina, and she and I had birthdays around the same time. So I had mi quinceañera, and I just came back from my family in Mexico. I'm very white. I know, so it's really hard to tell. And so I came back, and it was it was such a great experience to actually have that with my family. And then she's like, oh yeah, let's compare them. And listening to the story, and it made a complete mockery of just Latinx culture. They had a really mockery kind of piñata. They served tacos. It was hard to explain. It was
disrespectful.
It was horribly disrespectful in every level. And when I kind of went back and I was like, that's awful. Why would you do that? Everyone kind of brushed it off, and they're like, okay, well, whatever. It's just a silly party anyways. It doesn't mean anything. And when I tried to explain, I was like, oh, well, it's not just a party. It has a lot of very cultural significance. Everyone was like, okay, calm down, you're not blah, blah. She didn't mean it. You need to calm down and not go forward. So it's it's hard because, they're my family, but also they disrespected my other side of my family, they were just,
Okay, so I have a much better understanding now. So I would encourage you to speak, just like you did, and explain as much as you can. Start off with what's common. So what's common is that you're all family. You're all humans. So then find the things that are important, and maybe find another something that's important or that you could use as a comparison. So it may be a sweet 16 party here, and then compare that to the quinceañera here. and then show how this isn't just another birthday party, or turning 21, how that's a big deal here. It's not just another birthday. You're legal and you can go drink and you can go to this and you go to this party. So it is a symbol of a rite of passage to be able to go from one phase to another phase of life. So you could maybe use one of those to show how that's similar. And so it's at a different age. So this one is 15 versus this one is 21, but it still symbolizes going from one phase of life to another phase of life, and that it's important for people to know that, one, that they're valued and celebrated, and birthdays do that. And then that the fact that they're going from this phase to the next phase is important. And then also remember, and this is where it gets really difficult and tricky and really, really hard, is sometimes you do all of those things and other people choose to be who they are because that's where they are today. And so they may listen to some of it and they may not. And if they don't, for you to be able to rise above that experience, and it's going to be hurtful, and it may be hurtful for a long time, it may always be hurtful, but to be able to be the person that it sounds like you're trying to be, when you engage with them and stay in topics and conversations that you can agree on, so that you can stay family, so that you can love each other, so that you can have these commonalities. And if you know that you're a cat person and they're a dog person, maybe we don't talk about our pets today. Maybe today we talk about coffee or tea and we all drink tea. So maybe we have a tea conversation today until we can all grow to a place to have a cat-dog conversation, and then realize that we're all pet parents, whether it's a pet dog or a pet cat, we're all pet parents. And then maybe, hey, you guys, remember, it's been a little bit, but remember when I had my birthday party and I had my quinceañera and then you did, can we now talk about this conversation? So sometimes you have to kind of wait a little bit for people to get to a place to be able to listen and hear it. And sometimes people never get there. And finding a way to know that you can remember all of the things that you have in common, even when other people don't. And that's hard, but it's possible. And you're strong. And I hear your voice and you're telling your story very eloquently. Also, I didn't judge whether or not you were Hispanic or not Hispanic. I didn't make any assumptions, but I think that it's okay for you to use your words to tell people how you feel. And if they can't hear it right now, that's okay. You can tell other people, and other people can hear this thing. And that's why it's important to have a network, a circle of people. Some people can hear one thing and not others, but then you have another part of your circle that can hear this part. So you have people that you can talk to about this, and they can empathize and support you, even if they don't, because sometimes people won't. But just know that you are still supported and you get what you need where you need to get it.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
Well, I appreciate the invitation to be with you this evening. Before I get started with a few comments, I want to just acknowledge the spaces and places that I'm in, whether it be on campus or across the state or across the country. I'm always very, very aware that it is women who are alongside me or are in the audience learning or at the forefront of working for justice. And that has been something that's been historical, and it's something that's current. Not always getting the recognition that they deserve, but their presence has always been felt. I know it's been felt in my life by the women who nurtured me, by the woman who gave me birth, my mother. But I'm also very, very aware that in this work, which becomes difficult, but it also can be very, very joy-filled. And I really believe that it helps me to remember that the important role that women have in helping to nurture spaces and places, whether those be big or small, in the fight for justice. And I also just want to recognize that oftentimes that's at a high cost, because it may be not being recognized. It may be being silenced, even though your wisdom is what we need to hear most. And oftentimes it is because of the existence of patriarchy, sexism, and other forms of oppression that are at the cornerstone of the work that we need to be doing individually and collectively. And so I honor all of you that are here with us this evening. I honor the women that I know I stand upon as mentors, as women who have helped to change my life, nurture me, challenge me, and support me. And then I also look forward to understanding what your role will be in the future generations. Because I know that I'm in a place where I'm doing important work, but I also know that just as generations before me handed this work over, I know I'm in that place where I feel like that's where my next phase of my work is handing this work over to very capable hands that will do this work differently, oftentimes more powerfully, and oftentimes with a sense of clarity that I might not have at this time in my age and where I'm from. So just want to start out by just honoring that and the invitation to be here. I want to talk about, to begin with, a framework that has been really important for me in any work that I do, because I think it provides the opportunity to move beyond just saying that the best I can do is to learn about people different from myself and then treat them better. Because I oftentimes feel that the complexity of this work is honored when we really look at the 4 different ways that we can cause oppression or we can cause hurt, directly or indirectly to people, and also at each one of these phases where we can create change. Because I think that that's the important piece, is that our lives do not need to be only defined by the oppression that we experience. They can also be defined by the change we create, the change that we create with others, and the ways that we find clarity and strength in using our voice. And so at the personal level, it's our values, our beliefs, and our feelings. And those are things that I may have learned when I was 5 years old, when I had my first encounter with somebody who was racially different from me. Or it may have been something that I learned just this evening from some of the powerful panelists that have spoken before me. An example at this personal level that I oftentimes encounter is when I say my name or introduce myself, I'm oftentimes asked, "So Leonardo, where are you from?" And I'll say, "Tecumseh, Michigan, 60 years old, lived in this community my entire life." And then there'll be a second question, "No, really, where are you from?" "Well, I'm from Tecumseh, Michigan." I think I told you that already. And then there's what they want to hear. You know, I identify as Latinx, specifically as Mexican American. My parents came to Michigan from Laredo, Texas. So if we were to go back to where we came from, it would be in the United States, in Texas, not anywhere beyond that. Although I've got grandparents that are from Mexico. But the assumption that I had to have come from somewhere else. And I'm always proud to let people know that I'm 5th generation. I'm sorry, I'm not 5th, I'm 3rd, but I have 5 generations of my family that are in this country, didn't come from anywhere else but Texas. But because of how I look, because of my name, outside of always being asked if I'm Italian, so if there's any Italians on the screen, you know, I love the fact that you're always trying to recruit people into your culture, but I'm not at all Italian. I'm Mexican American. But it's important to understand that people have values, beliefs, and feelings based on little information that they know about you. And then they allow that to either be greater stereotypes or assumptions, or they become more curious and maybe want to know more about that and want to know more about your story. So at the interpersonal level, it's actions, behaviors, and language. So how do we take that, the personal values, beliefs, and feelings that we have about ourselves or about people different from us, and put them into action? And so one of the examples I want to provide you is something that I've been talking about and also struggling with, because I hear a lot of white people in work around race saying, you know, we just need to see everybody as being a part of the human race and everybody being human. And I get that. That's a really lofty, wonderful goal. I would want you to see me in that way. But what I struggle with is the daily outcomes for people in my community, that people that define the way that I do, feels very unhuman. The treatments, the behaviors, the outcomes that we're experiencing feel very unhuman. And so it's really hard for me to galvanize oftentimes around the sense that we ought to be all human, because in many ways what it feels like to me is an updated version of being colorblind. So if I don't see you for who you are, then I can just assume that we're all human. But what I want you to hear in order to help create change is that's a wonderful idea to have and to work towards, but we also have to look at the day-to-day outcomes for people who identify as Black, Indigenous, or other people of color. Do not feel human-like, do not feel as if we're part of this larger human family at times. At the institutional level, policies, procedures, and practices. So some of you are in positions within CHAARG where you're actually writing, updating, or transforming policies about your organization. I think this is one of those steps where you're saying as an organization, you know, we're looking around and we feel like we really need to learn, and we may also need to diversify the people that are a part of our organization. So some of you are creating or updating or changing those policies, practices, and procedures. But you also have to realize that some of those things aren't written down, and they still send out pretty big messages about who's accepted and who's not, or who this organization is for, or who it may not be. And some of that's unintended, but it's still providing, it's informing a person's choice as to whether or not they want to be a part of your organization. Some of you will also go on in your careers, in your professional careers, to write policies, practices, procedures for organizations that you provide leadership for. And so it's really important to understand that there are policies that invite people in, and there are policies, whether they're written down or not, that may give the message that everybody needs to assimilate to get along or to be a part of. Or there may be ones that are saying, we don't really feel that you belong here. And again, that could be a direct message or an indirect message. And then the final level of this is the cultural level. And we need to think about, how do we define beauty, or what's normal, or what's true, or what's expected? And I think that your work, to me, as I think about what you're doing and what you're trying to change, is really at this level of being able to better define culturally what it means to be a woman, what it means to use your voice in powerful ways to be women, but also knowing that that's being influenced by larger cultural norms or cultural expectations that don't allow you always to connect with your wisdom or to appreciate the diversity of what it means to be a woman in the US. And in many cases, that definition of beauty has been at the expense of women of color. And so if you define as white, and you were surrounded growing up with messages about this is what it meant to be beautiful, and in some way you saw that reflecting you, did you ever stop to think of who didn't it reflect? And who wasn't a part of that cultural norm or cultural expectation? And so these 4 levels are places where we have the opportunity, hopefully not in the long run, to create oppression or to create systems that don't support the true engagement and involvement of everyone. And you also have the opportunity to change those. And it can start with your organization and develop circles of influence beyond that. One of the other things that I do in the work that I'm a part of is I create learning opportunities that I really feel are better when they're taken into account more of a dialogue process. And at the last minute, I decided to include this because one of the things that I'm hearing over and over and over again is people who want to engage around these complex, beautiful issues, and they find that it becomes frustrating, or they find that when they want to engage, people want to engage in a particular way and they don't find any benefit from engaging that way, or they find that it seems to be this battle of who's got the last word, or who's got the right data, and who's got the right information. And so I wanted to just make you aware that oftentimes the way that we've tried to deal with complex issues in this nation is in this conventional process of debate, where we're trying to get one right answer. The goal is to be right, win, or persuade, to evaluate or be critical, to, as your opponent is talking, the thought bubble over your head is what's wrong with this picture, that you can't wait to plan your rebuttal. And as you're listening with judgment for errors and for flaws. And so this is the ways in which many complex critical issues get explored. And I may not even have signed up for being in a debate with somebody, but the way that the person wants to engage with me is set up that way, or the way that this process, if it's with a group, is set up, it's oftentimes a debate. And I just want to point out that I've been, studying this and looking at this, and I would say in the last 8 to 10 years, that debate has really turned into personal attacks. So instead of really even presenting a differing idea or a differing perspective, the first thing that happens is that there's a personal attack of the person. And in that process, I might get to their ideas. But if it's okay for me just to personally attack that individual, I might feel like I've been victorious in that conversation, in that interaction. What I want you to consider is that we can get further and farther and deeper with each other if we think about implementing the understanding process. And this is something that we can do in a large group when we have multiple people, like tonight on the call, interacting with each other, or we can do this one-on-one. I can hold myself to the ideas, the important information about the understanding process, where I'm positioning myself to know that there's multiple and valid perspectives, and not one person in that interaction has all of the truth. We're going to make truth together by understanding and valuing multiple and valid perspectives. That the goal is to understand, and that I use the skill of curiosity and openness, and really the cue of abundance. Wow, I am in this space today, and I'm learning these things, and I'm curious about what I'm learning, and there's so much more that I want to learn, instead of being closed and maybe even being silent, maybe even being triggered by what I'm hearing, to the point that I'm not going to say anything opposing because I don't want it to turn into a debate. And I say this a lot in my training, that I've got a 2-year-old grandson. And one of the things that I love about him is that he is asking a lot of questions. And so when we were younger, we had a lot of curiosity. And we might need to think about, how do I return to that? Versus what oftentimes is the opposite, and that's judgment. So how do I hold myself open? How do I hold myself with kind of my arms open from a place of abundance. What can I learn? What can I learn about myself? What can I learn about the other person? What can I learn about the issue? You set up the opportunity to listen to each other's story. And Eula's mentioned many of these things. So I really want to give out, a shout out to her for kind of laying this groundwork. That if we want to really get closer, more authentic and connected, we need to listen to each other's stories. And we need to find the similarities, and then we need to work on our differences. Because we typically are looking for the similarities because we usually don't have a lot of conflict around that. But the conflict doesn't have to be a big C, it can be a small c from a place of being curious, like, wow, why would you come to that conclusion when I come to this other conclusion? Let me try and figure that out. Let's learn from each other. I'm not doing a good job of this next one of listening more than I talk, but I'm a panelist, so I'm trying to provide some information. But how do you position yourself to listen more than you talk? Listen from the place, again, of curiosity, of being able to say, wow, there is something that this person has to offer to me. And I can't wait to find that out for myself or find that out together. And then we're in this place of reflection instead of reaction. And this can be really difficult because you may hear some things, especially I'm hearing this more and more with people in our families, that it's really difficult to have these dialogue-based interactions because somebody that you really care about might have really bad information and might be saying that to you. And how do you then reflect instead of react? And I want to challenge you because I've heard this a lot. And as a grandparent, I don't want to be put off to the side because I grew up in a particular time and I might have a perspective that needs updating. I want you to help me update it. You know, don't put me off to the side and say, well, he's just old. You know, he's stuck in his ways. Challenge me. Because without that challenge, I'm going to continue to believe what I grew up believing, and it's going to be to my detriment and the people that I interact with. So as you think about this as an organization, as women who are committed to doing what's right instead of to getting it right instead of doing what's right, I offer you some questions that you might want to discuss beyond this conversation. So what is the work that needs to be done at all 4 levels to move your invitation to join to an invitation to co-create and change? What are you doing day to day to build more authentic, connected relationships or partnerships with racially diverse women that you would like to consider joining your organization? Because it is day to day that we're doing this. For me to be in the place of teaching others about these issues, it was day to day. You know, it was when I was a child, my parents would take me, because they were my first teachers, they would take me to interactions with about race with white people. And I was to stay in the corner with my brothers and not make any problems for them. But I was learning day to day, you know, what it meant to be one of the first Latinx families to live in this very white rural part of Michigan. And I think it's really important for you to ask yourself all the time, in this process, what are you learning about yourself? Because ultimately, you can only change yourself. There's a lot of energy that can go into trying to change others, but what really happens is making the connection between I'm in this process, what am I learning about myself? And then how do I connect with others that might be learning the same thing? And what have you heard from the panelists today that can help to inform your ongoing work or next steps? I'm honored to be on this panel because I think that it provides me with new perspectives, new language, new ways to look at the work that I'm committed to doing. And I'm asking you to consider, what are you taking away? What is that which really is connected to who you are? And what is that that you still have work to do on or have challenges around? And I'm going to leave you with this quote. I'm sorry, the last question is, how will you determine what success looks like? And how these changes will help inform the narrative about your organization and its membership. So again, Eula talked about the power of one story. Well, what is your story? How does that story continue to get updated as an organization? Because it is what it is today on Sunday, but maybe it's different a week from now because of what you're applying from what you're learning. And I know that one of the really important things that people are doing, in particular that white people are doing during this time to show up better as allies or in allyship, is learning from the voices and the scholarship of people of color. And so I want to end my part of this presentation with the wisdom of Austin Channing Brown. She's an African-American woman. She grew up and went to theological seminary. I'm not sure if she's a practicing minister, but she does live in Detroit. And if you want to move to the next slide, I'll share this last piece of wisdom for us. When you believe niceness disproves the presence of racism, it's easy to start believing bigotry is rare and that the label racist should only apply to mean-spirited intentional acts of discrimination. Your politeness will not save you from the dehumanization white supremacy wreaks on yourself and the world. Niceness has yet to save us from the distortions of racism, and it won't. Niceness will never be enough. And so I take this as words that are helping me to understand that I can show up and be nice, and there's a lot more work that I need to do in order to build those authentic, connected, truth-telling relationships that I am hearing throughout tonight that you're committed to wanting to do. So thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this, and open up for questions for the panelists and not just myself.
Thank you so much, Leonardo. That was awesome. I really appreciate it. Again, before we move into the questions, I know it is like almost 7, but I just really want to say thank you again to all of our panelists. I have so much that I brought from all of those conversations that I am going to share with the rest of CHAARG. I'm going to try to make a little guidebook, but that was really incredible, and thank you again for sharing your time with us. And then I know we did have one question for, is Dr. Abassi still on?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, so earlier I missed it. I'm sorry about it, but we had a question for you. Grace had asked that you gave examples of a few situations people experience explicit racism, and what is an appropriate way an ally could intervene in one of those?
I think I want to emphasize one important point here is that we need to start with our own selves first. We need to check our own blind spots, implicit biases, or things that we consciously or unconsciously say, people that we heard inadvertently without thinking. So we first have to really work on improving our own selves. But if you are seeing or hearing about somebody mistreated or these slurs being said, don't be a silent bystander. If it's a situation which can endanger you, then please, yes, safety comes first. But even if you can't stop the act that's happening around you, you can go and reach out the victim, the target of the slur, and say, hey, I'm with you. I validate you. I understand you. I hear you. I see you. Because I think the biggest thing that happens when you are experiencing this, you feel very invisible. You feel very invalidated. So just hug, holding someone's hand, or saying something kind, All those are very important pieces. Or if you have heard of some incidents that happen, like I work with medical schools very closely, and there was on a group chat some Islamophobic comment made, but there was no action taken about it. It was just, I think the student that had made that comment was admonished, but there wasn't, like they let it slide. So of course, I raised the point that why aren't we doing more around it? This can be a moment to teach and educate others. So again, you can be advocate, you can be a friend, you can just send a letter out, write an opinion. I think activism and advocacy is extremely, extremely important. Be woke, like my daughters tell me, be woke, be aware what's happening around you. But first of all, check your own biases.
That's great, thank you.
Does anybody have any other questions? I know we had a few people. Leonardo, I guess one question I had for you, just in general, I know you focus like within organizations, DEI especially. So, and I know you kind of talked about like just how to focus on it within like our chapter of CHAARG, but do you think that like as a whole national organization that there is anything we can do there as well, just to kind of try and focus on bringing DEI into our group more?
Yeah, I think it's, again, I think part of what you need to do is be self-reflective about what's the narrative that you have about your group or that you know nationally is, whether that narrative is something that you can control probably isn't as most important as what you believe it is. And then from there, if there are chapters across the country that are doing a better job of both recruiting and retaining, and I say both, because it's not enough just to open a door and because there's been just history of invitations to come in, and then one or two people join. It's not a very pleasurable experience, and then the narrative after they leave is, well, you know, we tried to involve those individuals, those people, but you know, they just didn't like what we did, or you know, they just didn't understand who we were. When that's the end result, it says more about what needs to be done culturally within your organization to really go deeper into understanding. It's not just about inviting, but it's also about saying, what is it that, how will we change, and what's the work that we need to do in order to be committed to that change? So I'm imagining that there are some chapters that are doing you know, a little bit more ahead than other chapters. So what can you learn from those chapters? The other part of that is maybe looking at other student organizations and understanding their narrative, their story, so that you can learn from them also. So you don't feel like you're the only ones trying to do this. If you can find that there's others that are trying to work towards this, and you see the big and the small steps that they're making day to day, hopefully that can inform your process also.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
If there's no other questions, feel free to interrupt me if there are. I know it is 7 o'clock. I will put my email in the chat box. If you want to email me, if you have a question that you don't want to ask on the panel, I can forward it to one of our panelists. But again, I just want to really say, like, thank you so much. All 4 of our panelists, thank you so much. That was a great talk. I know a lot of people got a lot of value from that, and this was a really great conversation. And thank you to everyone else for coming, sharing your Sunday night with us. We really appreciate it. So again, thank you. But I guess I'll stay on if anyone has any questions for me or anything. But again, thank you all for coming. I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Thank you all for being with us.
Thank you.